Hey everyone, welcome to Rapid Reviews. So today we're going to talk about episode 5 of Ahsoka, titled Shadow Warrior. So this was probably my favorite episode of the season so far, and I think it's a real credit to Dave Filoni and the delicate balancing act that he's got to play with making a live action show that has the nostalgia and that is connected to the Clone Wars and to Rebels, but while making it its own thing. And I think where it struggled a little bit in the first few episodes, I think he does a really good job here. So we'll be talking spoilers ahead, so if that's a problem, you've been warned and you might want to wait. Although it's not a spoilery episode of TV. But anyway, let's get to it. So there's not a ton of story in this episode, at least as far as kind of narrative is concerned. I think there's a lot more character work in this episode, and mostly for Ahsoka. For Ahsoka, she begins the episode where she left off. She's in the world between worlds with Anakin. Anakin challenges her to a duel, I guess, and while she's reluctant at first, they fight. And eventually, they're transported back into two very specific battles. I believe they both happened. Oh, I know one happened in the Clone Wars. I believe the first one was in the Clone Wars, but I might be mistaken as I haven't watched that in a long time. But effectively, one spot was early in her training where she's kind of reluctant and almost horrified at war and what happens and the kind of consequences of it. And then the second one is during the Siege of Mandalore, where she is a warrior. And I think it's kind of like symbolic, this whole sequence. It's a symbolic kind of graduation where Anakin wasn't there for the Siege of Mandalore and to watch her at kind of her full powers. And so here it's almost as if she is graduated in this situation. So at the end of that sequence, she then fights Anakin again, although this time Anakin looks more like the Vader version of Anakin at the end of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. And they duel. She defeats him but stops from landing the killing blow, and then he kind of says that effectively that you've graduated, and you're ready to go back. And I really love that whole sequence. I think it looked great. There were so many beautiful sequences there. They did an amazing job with using the lightsabers as kind of a light source with the fog, and it really was this perfect balance of the live action with the animated shows, and this was kind of the world between worlds in several different ways. I feel like visually it was, and also thematically it was. So I think they did a great job. I think this is the best looking episode by far of the season. I think the first couple have had some issues with the CGI and things looking a little bit too much like it was animated or like a video game, where this just looked great. Everything did, especially in the world between worlds, and especially when they go back into the Clone Wars. It felt dreamlike, but in a way that was really good and really cool and different from anything that I think we've seen in any of the Star Wars shows so far. So I thought that whole sequence just works in a number of ways, again, symbolically, and for the character of Ahsoka. I think it works because it's showing her that she can be more than just a warrior. And even though we're seeing this graduation to being a warrior, there is this whole dialogue with Anakin, and I think she realizes that she has to be more than that. And I think that this sequence, as I alluded to last week, that there is going to be an internal conflict with her as far as letting Ezra go or not, and how she's going to deal with Sabine. And I think this really starts that change in her, and maybe a change in her approach to how she's going to deal with this whole situation of finding Ezra versus allowing Thrawn to escape. So in the episode, Hera, Chopper, and Jacen are all in search of Ahsoka, and we learn that Jacen has a strong connection to the Force. While we didn't get a ton with them, I really liked the dynamic between them, and I like that Jacen gets a little bit to work with, and he's not overbearing. Sometimes you get a little bit too much with these child actors, but I think he did a really good job. And again, some good character work between them, although I think it's a little strange that Hera would very willingly take her son into harm's way so quickly, but that's beside the point right now. So they eventually rescue Ahsoka, and she is literally baptized as she's pulled from the water, effectively being reborn after leaving the land that she was at. We learn that Hera will have to answer for her insubordination to the Republic, and Ahsoka figures out that she can use the Purgles to seek out Ezra. So, like I said before, this episode is more of a character study, and I think it did a great job. There's a ton of nostalgia still, but again, it balances that with the character work, so it just felt like it's something that was very much needed. I think that thus far it was a lot of callbacks and a lot of situations where we should identify with characters because we know them from previous properties. And I think in this case, it really gave us a lot to chew on with Ahsoka, especially, but also with Hera and with Jason. So Ahsoka has gone through a lot of change by the end of this episode. We see that her demeanor's changed, and as well as her look. Instead of the dark tunic and stoic demeanor that she had early on in the show, by the end she just seems warmer, and she's wearing much lighter colors. And it's a stark contrast, but a really interesting contrast, and I like that. So, it could be a little bit on the nose symbolically, but it's Star Wars, a lot of it's going to be on the nose. But I think at the end of the day, it just looked so good and so interesting that I'm okay with it being a little bit on the nose. So I also thought I really liked the way the end of the episode was done. It's almost shocking that they could take space whales and make me feel something, but I think it really worked. I think the score added to it. There was this feeling of triumph, and watching Ahsoka connect to this massive galaxy traveling whale and it respond to her genuinely felt hopeful and emotional, and it was hope in a way that I don't know that this show has gotten to yet, and that many of the other shows haven't. Like, I actually felt this swelling of warmth and hope in a show that thus far has been kind of bleak. So overall, I really enjoyed this episode. It's probably the best episode yet for this series. I think while it was limited narratively, it really did a great job of making me care for the characters in a way that it hadn't yet, and really allowing me to connect to their mission. And again, I think anybody watching this would connect with them and feel something, and it doesn't just require that previous viewing. So my only complaint is I feel like an episode like this should have happened a little bit earlier in the season, because I still feel like it meandered a bit until it got to this point. And now here we are at episode 5, and we only have a few episodes left, where this is a point where I feel like we could start kicking things into high gear. So I'm hopeful that we get Thrawn next week, and that we really get to see what this story is, and that we see what the stakes are, because I still don't think that the show's done a great job of really making us feel the stakes. And while this episode gave us a lot emotionally and with characters, I don't know that it gave us much as far as the stakes of the story. So I really hope that the next few episodes really do kick things into high gear and we get a lot of action and story. But really like this episode, and I give it a 9. Thanks for listening. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the channel. And while you're at it, leave a review. We can be found on all social media platforms at portable_whole. We can be found on all podcast platforms at Portable Whole Publishing. We can be found on the web at portablewholepublishing.com, and you can email us at portablewholepub@gmail.com.